It's been a week here that we're hunkered down with our family at home here in Northern California, sheltering in place like a lot of you. Everybody's working and learning from home, and all our connection with other people is through video like this. And so we're still working on how to get someone else to introduce this program. And so I'm going to continue to do it until we do. As many of you already know, due to the coronavirus crisis, Tse Chen Ling has moved their programs to a virtual format for the time being. And we know this is a challenging situation for everybody when these types of teachings and meditations can provide comfort to our community of students and beyond. This video can reach anybody in the world who has an internet connection and some kind of computer or phone. So the center is going to try and do its best to maintain as much of our scheduled programming as possible. Okay. So this talk is part of the Taste of Buddhism series. Taste of Buddhism shares the practical experience of Tibetan Buddhist tradition with people who are new to Buddhism, with people who are new to Buddhism. And even for people who don't consider themselves Buddhists at all, but who are curious to learn from this tradition. The series, it's also relevant for practicing Buddhists. Oh, it looks like Siri is answering some of my questions here too. Not you, Siri. So this is also relevant for practicing Buddhists who want to be re-inspired, or who also want to give us some critical feedback on what we're doing. If you're an expert out there, if you've been with this tradition for a long time, then please send your feedback on how we're doing in adapting these teachings to beginners. So the series is every Sunday from 10:30 to 12, and it follows the same format. There's a 30-minute talk, and then there's a short guided meditation. And then there's some time for discussion afterwards. So stay on after the meditation, and please bring your questions, any thoughts and comments, or any confusion. So unfortunately, I have to introduce myself, and I'll make it brief. My name's Scott Snibbe. I've been studying in this tradition of Tibetan Buddhism for about 20 years, and I've been leading meditations for about 13 or so. This is only the second live-streamed one, so I'm still getting the hang of this. I've been a long-time student at this center at Tse Chen Ling, and a student of its teacher, in particular, Geshe Nawang Dakpa, who's an incredibly well-trained teacher in the Tibetan tradition. And he follows in the same tradition as the Dalai Lama. So the purpose of the talk today is to address some of the fear and other disturbing emotions too, like loneliness, that people are feeling right now. Obviously people are frightening. It's a very uncertain time. And there's other problems too. Many people have lost their jobs. People are having financial problems. And there's also now the loneliness of isolation. Some of us, like me, are actually more social than we're used to with the family cramped in. And then others are by themselves and feeling lonely. So we'll talk a little bit about that too, of addressing the loneliness of isolation. Because when you're alone, your fears can get out of hand. They can amplify, especially at night. You know, your fears can get kind of wild on the pillow. So today what we're going to do is look at one of the strongest antidotes to pain and to fear and to anxiety, which is compassion. The dictionary definition of compassion is more or less a synonym for empathy. And so what we want to talk about here is more the Buddhist version of compassion, which is becoming more common in the West. Empathy is seen as merely feeling others' pain, whereas compassion, the Buddhist term is karuna, is more precise, and it means not only feeling others' suffering, but having a wish, eventually a very, very strong wish, to take others' suffering away. And so it's really important to see this distinction, because it's been shown that empathy alone can lead to burnout. People who work in hospitals, anyone listening who's a nurse or some kind of caregiver probably has had this experience of the burnout of taking care of other people, of feeling their strong emotions and not having a way to process them out. So with empathy alone, it can lead to burnout. It can lead to more stress because you get overwhelmed with other suffering when it doesn't have an outlet. Compassion, on the other hand, combines empathy with a wish to eliminate others' pain. And it's not necessarily that you even are capable of doing that or that you will do it, but it's the wish in your mind that you'd like to take others' pain away. So compassion, it's a mental technique to transform empathy into some kind of action. Even if it's just a mental action or an action of your imagination, it's turning your mind toward helping others, or at the very least, wishing to help others. Let me just check on this for a moment and make sure everything is going right. Let's see here. Yeah, I think so. So the technique that we're going to be doing today, that some of you are learning for the first time, is called taking and giving. In Tibetan, the term is Tonglen. And for at least 1,000 years, this was considered a secret technique. They'd sometimes call it an ear-whispered technique, one that was passed from monk to monk and from nun to nun, and then only when they reached a certain advanced stage in their practice. But today, mostly thanks to the Dalai Lama, these formerly secret teachings, they've been revealed, they've published. You can find them in books, videos, live streams like we're doing today. And there are even nonprofits and companies that are working to systematize and even commercialize these techniques so that they're more widely available to everybody. It kind of seems an age ago, but about 3 weeks ago, I was at a teaching by the Compassion Institute, which was co-founded by the Dalai Lama's translator, Thubten Jinpa, with some professors from Stanford. And it was a workshop for about 200 people all together in a room, imagine that, at the Gyoto Foundation in Richmond. And we took a workshop on compassion like this, where they've taken compassion and turned it into a secular system for anybody to learn. So the essence of the technique of taking and giving is to empathetically imagine the fear and the pain and the suffering of others, and then to take a step beyond just feeling it, to sincerely wishing to take it away. And it's not just abstract. You actually combine this wish with a special kind of visualization that I'll go through later when we do the meditation, because the visualizations can have a very strong effect in making an otherwise abstract idea concrete. So I myself have used this technique for some time, and I found it quite effective when I was suffering, when I was physically suffering, when I was mentally suffering, when I was financially suffering, or when I was sick, or injured, or had bad luck, bad fortune. Even in work problems, I would use it. It's actually a great technique if you're sitting in front of an angry boss or some huge problem you don't know how to face, or relationships or emotional problems. In general, it's a technique that works on any kind of problem, and it works through expanding the sphere of your heart and your mind beyond just your own concerns. So it may be worth a concrete example here, because the technique actually doesn't have to be done sitting on a cushion. Once you learn it, it can be used out in the world every day. And a good example is actually a story that the Dalai Lama told. And this was a story, I think, from about 10 years ago. And he said that he was having a very severe stomach pain. He was having some really severe health problems a few years ago. And he was so severe, the pain in his stomach, that he had to be taken to the hospital. And so on the way there, he was kind of doubled over in the back of the car. and in great pain. And what he said, he was able to look out the window and see the various poor and the suffering people along the roadside in India, sick people and beggars and homeless people. And what he said was that by thinking about their pain, by realizing how much they suffered, that he was able to use his own pain as a bridge to connect with others. So he said that, in fact, the process genuinely managed to lessen his own physical pain. And that's because the pain, of course, is in the brain itself. The body responds to various nerve stimulations, but then there's a degree to which you can feel and react to pain that can be modulated. And I'm talking this way, not just anecdotally, but there are some scientific studies backing this up, that pain is a psychological phenomenon, that it's the brain telling us that we've been hurt or that we're in danger. And then through various types of meditation, visualization, certain types of positive thinking like this, that it's possible to reduce or even to eliminate the strength of physical pain. And even in a wholly non-religious way, that's adapted by Western doctors for people with chronic pain, with cancer. I had a friend who had cancer who had great luck treating parts of the problems through these kind of visualizations. And so, of course, it can even work a little bit more easily with psychological rather than physical pain. Obviously, physical pain can be hard to eliminate when it's severe. So this use of compassion is seen as one of the greatest antidotes in this tradition, a way of easing or even eliminating our own psychological, physical suffering by becoming aware of other suffering, by feeling closer and by feeling more sympathetic to them. So you're probably curious exactly how this technique works. The way I described the Dalai Lama was a little bit more anecdotal in everyday life. So the way it works through a meditative process is to imagine that you're taking away all the pain and all the suffering of others. And then after that, through that process, you actually do it with a certain type of visualization that, again, we'll talk about in a moment. But then after you imagine taking away all their pain and suffering, then you imagine giving others all of your safety, all of your health, all of your peace of mind. And it might sound a little frightening, actually, but you can rest assured you're not actually doing this. You're not magically giving away everything you have and taking on everyone's problems. This isn't a kind of magical spell that takes away other people's problems. It doesn't actually take away other people's problems. But imagining like this in meditation has a very strong positive effect for you, because it has the effect of opening your heart to others in a productive way that eases your own fear and your own pain, your own stress and your own suffering. So when you get into this state of mind that's more understanding of the pain of others, the paradox is that you actually become far better when you get off of the cushion at remaining calm, at helping others, at staying present, and at doing the best for both the people that are close to you and also strangers that you encounter in daily life. So I actually remember a time that I was feeling some acute psychological pain once. It was actually after a major breakup. And I was lucky enough to having a Buddhist monk who was staying with me at the time. And I started talking to him about it. And he asked me this interesting question. He asked me how big my mind felt at that moment. So he said, "Where exactly is the space of your mind?" Which was interesting because I knew some of those techniques for looking at the mind, but I didn't quite understand that there was a connection between that and your feeling of stress and anxiety and pain. And so what I realized when he asked me that was that my mind had actually become very small. That when you're really focus on your own problems and your own fear, your mind actually concentrates, and becomes quite small and focused. And you can even feel it like this really sharp point in your head, that all of your consciousness has collapsed into a single point. And so I saw how when I was that worried and fearful and anxious, that I was stuck in a loop, thinking about myself, thinking about my own problems, feeling scared and sorry for myself. And what he told me was a great way to start is just to expand my mind, to actually literally expand the space of my mind and bring it out to fill my whole body and then beyond my body, and then to start encompassing him and the people around us, the people in the whole city, and eventually the whole world. And what he said was that the larger that we see our minds, either literally or figuratively, the more at peace we are. And so, like I was saying, you can literally perceive the space of your mind small and tight, like this burning point of painful energy in your skull. Or you can see it as a vast, diffuse field of energy and connection. Hold on a second. With the whole, so like a vast, diffuse field of energy and connection with the whole world and even the greater universe. So I hope that doesn't sound too spacey to people, but it's worth that kind of experiment sometimes if you feel really stressed out and focused just on your own problems, to expand the space of your mind and see how that helps. But then beyond that literal interpretation, the metaphorical way of expanding your mind makes even more sense. Because ruminating solely about yourself, about your own problems and your own fears, however reasonable and justified those fears and the problems are, obviously we're facing really serious fears and problems right now. They're legitimately horrible. But focusing on them solely, and especially exaggerating and ruminating and focusing almost solely on you and yourself and how you're worried about those problems, it doesn't tend to improve your state of mind. So usually your fears and your worries get amplified when you keep focusing on yourself. But expanding your mind to think about others, thinking about the people that love you, the other people in the world who have problems and fears like yours, and people that are suffering far more than you. If you do this with a mind of compassion, rather than just empathy, rather than just feeling others' pain, which we know can actually be overwhelming and even harmful, but with this mind of compassion, expanding your mind in a way that it becomes more peaceful. And so the Dalai Lama says this very eloquently and succinctly. I think you can see it on bumper stickers too, actually. Way of staying calm and happy through very difficult times. And what he says is, he says, by all means be selfish, but be intelligently selfish. If you want to be happy, cherish others. And again, you may have seen that on a bumper sticker. And hopefully it hasn't just become a platitude, because it's a very deep statement. Because of course it's your right to think about yourself and your needs and your happiness. But what is the path to genuine happiness for yourself? And paradoxically, what the Dalai Lama says, and I think what a number of us have discovered by following the same guidance, is that the path to genuine happiness is selflessly thinking of others. So then also, just to be a little bit more practical, if you can manage to calm yourself down, there's huge benefits, especially in a time like now. Staying calm in the face of genuine danger, like we have today, helps you with some basic things like absorbing information accurately, making rational, good decisions. It helps you to be available also to effectively soothe and to care for your family, your friends, your co-workers, and strangers, however much you can do that from a distance. And then there's another thing too, because being able to calm your mind and to bring yourself to a point of present awareness, being totally present in where you are and what you're doing right now, without anxiety, without fear. Through this type of compassionate meditation, that may be one way you get there. Other people may have other means too. There are other types of calming, stabilizing meditations. Mindfulness meditation is very popular now. But however you get yourself there, if you're able to calm your mind and to bring yourself to a point of this stability and presence, that it's not only mentally helpful, but it actually promotes your immune system's health. It even prevents communicable disease from arising and accelerating. There's an article in the New York Times all about this. It said, what can I do to boost my health? And it had a list of 10 things, and the very first one was to reduce stress, especially in your own house. If you're in tight quarters with your partner and your family or roommates, to make sure those relationships are healthy and nourishing, to let go of little annoyances during the day. That by getting along with the people immediately around you is actually the number one thing, they said in this article, to keep your immune system healthy. So that was one article. There are lots of articles you can find. I've read a few others too. Of course, what can we do to stay healthy? It's a really short list right now. Stay away from people outside the ones that you live with, washing your hands, don't touch your face. But then this idea that in terms of boosting your immune system, helping it to be ready to fight infection and to stay healthy, it's not, there's things like goji berries and celery shakes and things like that people are trying, but the biggest one seems to be this reducing stress, feeling the love and the support of others, keeping a calm, and if possible, a positive state of mind, because stress is this great cause and accelerator of disease. And hopefully that doesn't make you more stressed out. Okay, so now we can dive into the meditation. That is just an introduction to the topic. I'll get this ready here. So take a moment to find yourself cross-legged on the floor, if that's comfortable for you. If you have a cushion that you sit on, elevating your spine is very helpful. But if you don't, that's fine. Just sit on a couch or on a chair and have your legs straight out and down and feet flat on the floor in that case. Or you could sit cross-legged up on the couch if you like. The most important part though is to straighten your spine, so you can kind of adjust yourself back and forward until your spine is straight. You can put your hands on your knees or your right hand on top of the left with your thumbs touching. And if you can, relax your body first. You can scrunch up your shoulders and let them go, which helps to relax the tension in your shoulders. And then just mentally tell the different parts of your face to relax. Your brow, your eyes, your ears, around your mouth. And they say it's very helpful in meditation to almost close your eyes, like 80 or 90%. So a little bit of light comes in, which keeps you awake, but then otherwise you're focused inward. But if that doesn't feel comfortable, you can actually meditate with your eyes open. And then if that becomes distracting, you can close them. So let's start with a motivation. So why are we meditating? And so we can set our motivation to spend a brief time on the cushion, to reduce our anxiety, to reduce fear, to reduce loneliness, to increase our compassion, to help us make good decisions, so that we can be rational, so that we can remain warm and open and helpful. Both for ourselves for our own physical and our mental health, but also for those around us. And if you have any other personal motivation, you can reflect on that right now while you're meditating. Mental or physical pain that you're trying to overcome, or good qualities you're trying to cultivate. And then we move into a stabilizing meditation. So we'll do this very briefly, just for 1 minute. But for 1 minute, if you can, please try to bring your attention to your breath. You can focus at your nostrils, where air comes in and out of your body. Or you can focus on your abdomen, the rise and fall of your chest. And as you try to focus on your breath, you have the in-breath, cool, then there's a pause, and then the out-breath with the warmer, moister air comes out of your body. And as you do that, even for 1 minute, you're likely to encounter distractions, that some pains might arise in your body, or feelings, emotions, or thoughts, plans, memories. And so as they do, just let them gently fade away. That there's no need to pull them close and to examine them. But there's also no need to push them away. That those thoughts, feelings, and the perceptions, and even the little pains in your body, they come and they go, and they'll naturally disappear, or at least lessen, if you don't pull them in to the center stage of your mind. So just for 1 minute, silently, let's all meditate on our breath to stabilize our mind. And then next, the next step after stabilizing our mind is to briefly reflect on our own good qualities. That beneath any fear, any anxiety, any loneliness, that all of your best qualities remain stable. Your capacity to be kind and generous and loving and helpful and patient. Your capacity for joy and camaraderie and your ability to focus and to be effective in the world, to be rational, and to be compassionate. And so try and visualize all of these qualities as if they materialize as a bright white light at the center of your chest. The visualization helps to give these qualities a form and a focus, because our minds are so visual. So bring that light to mind at the center of your chest, all your good qualities. And then imagine expanding that light slightly, strengthening those qualities in you, and seeing that there's enough to share, there's enough to help others, and that when we exercise these qualities, they only grow, they never run out. And so now picture everyone close to you. Imagine that you could see them quite clearly in your mind. All in front of you, spread out in front of you. You know, your partner, if you have one, your family, your friends, your colleagues, everyone with whom you have a close, positive relationship. And come back now to the pain and the fear and the anxiety and the loneliness that they're likely feeling. And some of them may be even experiencing genuine illness right now. And for a moment, just try to genuinely experience how that feels to them and where it overlaps with your own experience. That others are as afraid as I am, and they've probably even shared with you over the phone and video their fears, their concerns. Think how some of them are lonely, shut in by themselves. With even greater fears because there's nobody immediately there to hug them, to hold hands and comfort them face to face and eye to eye. And then anybody who's sick, even with a common cold, I think anybody who's gotten a little bit sick lately is feeling reasonably terrified because they don't know whether they have the virus. And so if you know anybody who's been sick over the last couple weeks or sick right now, imagine how they're feeling. And then come back and think of your own strength, your own good qualities. Recenter yourself if that process started to spiral you downward, worrying about your own fears or worrying about theirs, this is where we shift into compassion. And instead of just empathizing, we think, how much I wish if I were able that I could take away all their pain. There's only one of me, but there's so many of them. So if it were possible for me to take away their pain, and even if it meant some small pain for myself, of course I would do that. And if this doesn't feel possible for you right now, that's okay. But you could imagine what it would be like if it were possible. Or you could make an aspiration to one day feel that bravery and courageousness to be able to consider others' pain and wish to take it away. Anyone listening who's a parent probably knows this feeling. That it's more painful to see your child suffer than to suffer yourself. That you'd gladly exchange with your child. I think that's relatively easy to understand. Most of us who've been children saw our parents with that kind of concern, where our parents were more upset about our pain than we ourselves were. And so this meditation is to try to extend this kind of deep, unselfish compassion to everybody that you're close to. That if I could, I would take away their pain, even if it meant some pain to me. And then we use a visualization. So we imagine that all of these people's difficulties, just as our good qualities, manifest as this bright light that's still shining inside of our heart. Imagine that every person's difficulty in front of you, all of those people close to you, imagine that all of their trouble and pain manifests as a kind of dark, blackish, gray smoke at the center of their chests. And in that smoke is all their fear, all their anxiety, all their financial strain, their loneliness, any illness, any lack of safety and security. And now, as you breathe in on your next breath, imagine that your breath pulls up that dark cloud. So it starts to pull up along where their spine is. And imagine on the next breath, as you breathe in, that smoke comes out in two streams out of their nostrils. All their pain, all their suffering, all their anxiety, all their fear, loneliness, and any genuine danger and genuine illness they face too. And when you breathe in again, that dark cloud is now between you, starting to coalesce again. And then let that cloud come right in front of your face. So it pools into a focused, small, dark sphere. And think again that I would be willing to take away their pain, even if it meant some pain for myself. And of course, it's not really possible to do this, to actually take on their pain, but just think, if it were possible, I would be brave enough to try. So generate a strong sense of courageousness, of fearlessness. And remember again all of your strength, all of your good qualities. The bright light at the center of your chest. And on your next breath, you breathe in. And you allow that smoke to come in through your nostrils. And then it goes down to the center of your chest. And when that dark smoke meets the bright light of all of your good qualities, all your goodness, there's an enormous explosion. It's like a little supernova. And you imagine that all of your friends and family and colleagues' problems are completely destroyed. And you feel all your own goodness and kindness and patience and stability strengthened. And then you also feel light going out on individual beams to the hearts of all the people in front of you, sending them everything that they need, and giving them fearlessness, giving them calm, giving them compassion. If they're lonely, giving them a sense of always being loved and cared for. And also giving them all the material things that they need to. Giving them health, a place to live, abundant food. Giving them security in their job, financial security, physical safety. So imagine that that's genuinely happened. Again, this isn't a magic spell. The purpose is to strengthen your own compassion, your ability to help others. But just as if you were watching a movie of what could be possible, imagine that this has actually happened, that all your friends' and family's problems have been removed, that they're safe and healthy, that you've given them all the happiness and joy and material comfort that they need. And so the next step is to expand. And that to imagine around all of the dear close ones to us, that a vast crowd arises, billions of people, the whole Earth's population around you. It's people you know closer than those you don't. And it includes your enemies, people you don't get along with, and politicians you don't like, and everybody in the whole world, no one excluded. And for a moment, let your mind empathetically move out to people that are suffering. And you can think of people who are afraid and lonely and anxious. But then also move to people who are suffering more. Think of the people who have this virus right now. People in hospital beds, or at home, or homeless, or even in prisons. And think of the real suffering that they're going through now, the difficulty to breathe, the weakness, the fear, the anxiety. And before that becomes overwhelming, add the compassion to your thoughts. genuinely wish to take away all their suffering. That if I possibly could, I'd have the courage to take away their pain and suffering, even if it meant some suffering for myself. And imagine all the doctors and the nurses that are treating these people, their exhaustion, their fear that they might catch this virus, some of them that have already caught it through helping others. And you can think that, of course, if I could, I would take away their pain, their suffering, their fear, their anxiety, their illness. And then there are even numerous people that have already died from the virus. And so think of the sadness of their family and friends and colleagues, the people that treated them unsuccessfully, their sadness, their regret. If I could take away all their suffering, help them to accept the pain and the loss, of course I would. And then the rest of the world, billions of people afraid, having difficulty sleeping, having trouble deciding on the best course of action, being thrown into financial difficulties, or already in financial difficulties. Some of them already lost their jobs, others afraid they're going to. We're not alone in our fear and our suffering, our loneliness. We're not even alone in our loneliness. By opening our hearts to others' fear and suffering, we actually can calm ourselves and soothe ourselves through a feeling of togetherness, through an altruistic wish to take away everyone else's pain. And so imagine all those billions of people around you, that all of their pain and suffering and difficulties and illness, that it all rises up like a great low storm cloud, floating above all their heads, dark, all the pain and the suffering and the fear around this new threat to our health and to our livelihood, to the world. And then breathe in and let that cloud condense in front of you gradually. With each in-breath it grows smaller and denser until eventually it's a very dense, dark cloud in front of you, before your face. This one very dark, very dense, almost like a mini black hole of all the world's pain and suffering around this new threat. And then summon that courageousness and remember that you're not actually taking it on, that this is a mental exercise that benefits you more than anyone else. And think, if I could, I'd be willing to take on this pain and suffering if it meant that everyone on earth was free of it. Try to generate that courage. And if you can't, that's okay. And just imagine or wish that one day that you could. But again, in the meditation, there's no danger to yourself. It's a mental exercise to expand your compassion. And so imagine or think that if I could, I would take on all the world's suffering around this virus. And so on your next in-breath, take in that cloud. Let it come in two streams in your nostrils, up, down, and around. And it touches that great spot of all your goodness, all your best qualities. And there's a huge explosion of light again. And that light fragments into billions of individual rays that spread out, that shoot out to the heart center of everyone on earth gathered around you, and offers them everything they need: health, safety, security, medicine, food and shelter, loved ones, and the courage and the calmness and the intelligence to deal with whatever difficulties they face. So rest in imagining for a moment that this has happened, that you've taken away all the pain and the suffering all over the world around this virus, that you've given everyone everything they need to pass through it, to live stably and happily and securely. So just silently for half a minute. And then, finally, as we end the session, we dedicate all the goodness, all our mental evolution from doing this meditation together so that we can remain calm and stable and present and rational and wise and compassionate for our own safety and security and health, and for all those around us. May we be able to help ourselves and others in all the ways that they need and that we need. And may we also know our limits, how and when to protect ourselves, how to soothe and calm and nurture ourselves through a very difficult time. You can come out of the meditation, and we now have some time to take comments and questions. So if you have them, put them into the chat thread, or you can also message privately to Tse Chen Ling, and Stephen can pass them on to me. Okay, so it looks like we have a first question here. How do we keep from being overwhelmed when doing compassion, empathy, sympathy meditation? So I think one of the first ways, of course, is to remember that this isn't actually some kind of magic trick or voodoo or something like that. There isn't a way that you can become sick by imagining taking on someone's sickness in this way. So remembering that the purpose that you're doing this is to strengthen your good qualities, and also to be gentle on yourself, that if at any point it doesn't feel like this is a good technique, this is an advanced technique, and it was a formerly secret technique, possibly for some of these reasons, that it is quite powerful and also could be intense. For example, if you only did this with empathy rather than compassion, the studies that I've seen would say that it actually would not be good for you. It would make you more stressed out. So I think, number one, remembering that the purpose of this is to increase your compassion, your connection to others, and that benefits you first and foremost. The main benefit is to yourself. But the paradox is, if you really want to be happy and calm and peaceful, that the method, according to the Dalai Lama in this tradition, is actually to think of others. So that's one way. But the other is actually just to definitely have your boundaries and your limits. And if this isn't the right practice for you completely, then don't take it on for now. Or if parts of it don't feel right, you can just stop thinking about that and focus on your breath. Going back to stabilizing techniques, mindfulness techniques is always reasonable. But many people find this very effective. And also, like many meditations, the progress comes gradually too. Some people have a very powerful first experience with this type of meditation, but others it grows over time. So being gentle with yourself, first of all, I think is the very, very most important. Knowing your limits, don't do the practice if it doesn't make sense. Remember that it's not magical and you're not going to really take on people's pain. And cut out any parts that don't make sense or the whole thing at all. Okay. Question 2. And by the way, if anyone feels like the question wasn't answered, feel free to pipe in with more clarifying questions. Okay, 2. Many of us are dealing with a level of isolation that may be new for us. Any advice on how to work with that? Yeah, something that actually surprised me is that one of my closest teachers, Venerable Rene, lives most of the time in isolation, and he's done 7 years of solitary retreat. And when I've talked to him about that, he's always told me that he never feels lonely. He always feels like his teachers are close to him. And again, that's not necessarily some magical thing that they're like ghosts in the room around him. But that through this big mind, the person who founded our tradition, Lama Yeshe, used to call this big love, or great compassion. I think Mahakaruna is what it's translated from. And through having that kind of big love or great compassion, it means your happiness is very, very stable. There's also a teacher named Shantideva who writes about this, that when you have this big heart of compassion, you're happy when you're alone, you're happy when you're with other people, you're happy with crowds, you're happy one-on-one. Expanding your heart and your sphere and thinking of others in this particular way. Like there's many different ways to think of other people. Like you can think of other people and become more and more scared. You can think of other people and get really angry. And so this is a means to take control of your mind and decide how you're going to think about others, rather than letting your mind just follow its own course and, and in some cases just latching onto whatever comes into your mind and then amplifying it, whether negative or positive. This is a deliberately cultivated technique. So I think in general, though, that's what they say, and I certainly find it works for me. There is a very, very simple technique. We actually talked about this last week too. An extremely simple technique to have a positive experience and not even go to much effort. You can do it like laying on the couch or kicking back, is rejoicing. So just to sit down and to think of all the good things that people have done today, that you yourself have done today. If for some reason you can't think of any good ones, go on the internet and go look up a few. But it's quite easy to imagine. Just imagine all the families together at home and the kindness of the parents, giving up so much time, teaching their kids one-on-one, preparing all the meals, making the kids feel safe and happy. All of the doctors and nurses working to help people. So it's sort of a lighter version of this meditation. It's actually the opposite of thinking of others' pain, is thinking of all the greatness, all the goodness that people are doing in the world, and focus only on that. It's okay you need to spend some time during the day catching up on what's going wrong and to keep abreast of it. But at least spend, 5, 10, 15 minutes thinking of everything that's good, everything that happened good. It's a nice thing to do midday or at 5 o'clock, after like the bulk of the day is done. That's a really simple technique. Actually, I think that's a very good technique, both for dealing with isolation and like negative emotions, because it starts to connect you with the goodness of everyone around you. Obviously, there's really practical things too. You can get onto Zoom conferences with people. My daughter has surprisingly been, she's very social, but she's been doing video play dates with a friend like for an hour a day. So I think those practical things too, trying, for those of you who aren't as familiar with the technology, trying Zoom or FaceTime, or other ways of doing video and phone calls. It's helped me stay in touch with all my friends as well. Okay, another question 3. Can you talk a bit more about the different dimensions of compassion and empathy? Yeah, so this is one where these teachings are actually quite formal when you study them, and they're broken into many categories. But to speak about it just quite simply, the first level of compassion and empathy is obviously for the people closest to you, the people that you love most dearly, your family, in particular your partner, people very close to you. That's usually pretty easy, although like your partner can be tricky sometimes. You have like a mixed relationship with your partner. It's often your source of greatest strife as well as greatest love. Sometimes your pet or your child, for sure, are sometimes the easiest one. So that's like the closest and also usually the easiest sphere of compassion and empathy. And then everybody close, and then everyone else who benefits you in some way. The people who do nice things for you, your friends, your family, the colleagues that you get along with, positive acquaintances, people in stores you see from time to time. That's the next level. And it's really important to go at least to that level, because the selfishness does surround a family, and you can see like the family unit itself can have a level of like fear and anxiety and pain. So I think it's quite important to expand at least beyond the sphere of your family from this perspective, to like others that are close to you in your life. And then you start to enter into more advanced techniques, because traditionally the next step is actually your enemies. So to think about people you don't get along with, think about your personal enemies if you have them, people you're competitive with at work, or who undermine you, or a boss you don't get along with, or a neighbor you're fighting over something with, and realizing they suffer just the same as you. In general, the conflicts you have with them, that's not a personal vendetta directly against you, but there are many different reasons they came to behave the way they did that have nothing to do with you. And so expanding your compassion to them, that even though you don't get along, of course you don't want them to get sick. You want them to be happy and healthy and safe. And then, other people in the world, think of bigger enemies, enemies you don't know but that annoy you, enemies you might read in the paper every day. A lot of people have strong feelings towards our leaders. So thinking of those people and realizing they also deserve health and happiness and love, that can be harder than even your individual enemies for a lot of people. And then expanding to everyone else in the whole world. And that can be difficult simply because of your imagination, like trying to, it's hard to conjure billions of people. And actually you need some education too and research to think of, everything that's going on. I read that 30,000 people die of poverty every day. So thinking of those people and the suffering that they go through. Even the suffering of celebrities, people who are always under the spotlight and competitive, often quite competitive, and worried about losing, their fame and their status. Like there's all kinds of suffering in the world that requires a lot of creativity and some research to take on and to imagine. So that's a quick answer to that. That compassion is like a deep, deep subject. You can get like a PhD in compassion from a Tibetan perspective. Okay, let's see, a comment. Oh, there's a long comment. Okay, someone made a nice comment. Oh, I see. Someone says it's probably harder for us to do this practice because we literally fear breathing in the virus. But this presentation was helpful and manageable. Okay, that's good. Generosity and gentle. Yeah, be gentle on yourself. That's nice. They were saying that the presentation, the emphasis on gentleness was really helpful. Okay, so at least for somebody it worked. It is a little, I think it is a little scary and requires some skill to guide yourself through. So I'm glad for at least one person that was helpful. If anyone else has a question, last call, put it in the chat thread or send it to Tse Chen Ling. I'll wait a little bit. Okay. Someone says, can you talk about your experience with this technique? Yeah, well, I did a little bit in the introduction. I would just say I found the technique extremely helpful, especially in moments of real crisis where I really don't know what to do with all my negative emotions and fear and pain. Like, because if you have a habit of doing this practice and then even, getting to teach it, they say like you only learn up to 75% of a topic by studying it, and then by teaching you get the next 25%. So actually leading meditation like this is really helpful for me. But I would say like that when I can remember to do this practice, it's extremely helpful, especially in interpersonal conflicts too. For me, that's actually one of the ones that's the most painful, because I really don't like being in a conflict with another person, but it happens from time to time. So right in that moment, when you're in a conflict with another person, actually to go to that visualization and imagine how they're suffering, like get me out of my own mind and imagine how they're feeling and how much they're suffering in this conflict, and sincerely wishing that to end. And also I'm right there, very concretely able to help it end. And that often really softens my mind and think about them. And if I'm really in a good state, it will help me to actually say like, hey, what is going on for you right now? Like, how can we work together to soften this, like to soften this and to come closer together. Another way that I really enjoy doing this personally, and they recommend, our teachers recommend, is when you're out in the world, which obviously we're not much anymore. Although if you go out exercising, actually this is a great one for today because you can't actually interact face-to-face with people. So the way it's taught, actually, and the way that I've used it a lot, is if you're on a bus or a subway car, everyone is kind of frozen off in their own world, with these imaginary walls. But imagining when you're on the train or on the bus, again, you're right, like breathing in other people is not the greatest visualization for today. But, imagining that on the subway, breathing in all of their pain. I'm saying this was useful to me before this crisis. Imagine breathing in their pain, taking it on, imagining all the different ways different people on the train suffer, lots of them with financial problems, kids that are hard to raise, single mothers, and all kinds of things. Taking on all their problems and then offering them everything I have. Venerable Rabina gave a great teaching once of a very concrete way. Like, imagine taking your keys, like the keys to your car and your house, and imagine walking by a homeless person and you just hand it to them. And you say, here you go, take my house, take my car. Obviously, don't do this at home, don't really do this. But imagining doing that is very powerful in a lot of different ways. I do that sometimes with homeless people, that technique on the bus. If I were to project that now into daily life, it's actually really sad in a lot of ways, avoiding people right now on the sidewalk, keeping your distance, out if you're hiking in the woods and so on. So that imagination, first of all, something concrete of just offering your smile. But then that imagination, using this Tonglen technique when you're out in the world today, if you get outside, keeping your distance from people, but imagining taking on their pain and suffering. Maybe, obviously don't imagine actually breathing in their breath. I think that's quite painful. But imagine breathing in their pain and their suffering and their fear, and destroying that and sending them out happiness and health and safety. Those are some ways the technique has helped me. Well, I think this might be a nice time to end the broadcast. I really enjoyed this. The meditation actually helped me a lot this morning. So I appreciate anybody who's out there who followed along.